Alright, welcome everyone. We're going to be getting started in just a few minutes. Just letting everybody get the link out, make sure you get in, get settled. We're going to have some fun today. We're going to learn some cool stuff. And somebody's going to get very lucky. So hang tight and we're going to start in just about 3 or 4 minutes. Welcome everybody. I see people joining the stream. We're going to get started in just a moment, so hang tight. Okay, so it's recorded and viewable for free. I believe so. I believe that all of my streams are always recorded, and this will be this week's episode of the pilgrimage as well. So I believe so. All right. So let's handle the preamble to begin with. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Welcome. My usual spiel is greetings, pilgrims, and welcome to a very special episode. Today marks the 5-year anniversary of the Polygon Pilgrimage. And if you're not familiar, for 5 years now, I've been trying to put out a video every Sunday. I put out a new tutorial on whatever I'm learning with 3D art. I just like to turn around and share that back with all of you. And it's always free. I never ask for anything in return. I just want to share, and I want to make every other artist better, and that makes art better. So that is my quest, that is my journey. So today, to celebrate, we have something really special. At the end of the stream, I'm going to be choosing a random subscriber from my YouTube channel, and they will win a 1-year subscription to a Substance product. Now, this is coming from Algorithmic, not from me personally. So the way we're going to do this is we'll pick a random winner. Then that winner will have to send me a PM with their Algorithmic account name, and then I will tell them, hey, this user is the one who won, and then they'll hook you up in the back end. Okay? So let's go ahead and get started. As always, this is a live event, So there may be noises, distractions, technical difficulties, but we will work through it. And to begin with, I want to give a huge shout out and a very humble thank you to 80 Level. The guys over there have been very gracious to help host this. They've been very kind in sharing my artwork and sharing my tutorials and getting it out to you guys. So thank you so much for all of your help. And now let's jump into making some cool stuff. So if you are following along and if you want to do this in real time or when this video is posted later, I am using Substance Designer 6.0.2. That is my version number. And here's what I have made. So I was really interested in making some clockwork gears, similar to like the inner workings of a watch. Ultimately, what I want to do is take this Substance archive, bring it into UE4, and see if I can dynamically change the parameters, and so almost have like an animated clockwork mechanism that's entirely flat, that is one texture. Now that's a lot for the Unreal Engine to handle, but I want to see if I can do it, so we'll see. So there are multiple types of gears that I've created here, and if we look at the chart here, it's a little crazy, as always, but this is all of the different types of gears here. This is our chart, which shows us each of them together just in a nice neat pattern, and then all of this over here, all of this noise, this is just generating our preview that we have here. So this is all for what I call like the make it pretty. So we make it work over here, we make it pretty over here. So this is all for creating this cube here and showing off, and all of this is all just all of that. I'll go over that as well and show you how I broke that down, but the main thing you're here for is how do we create the shapes in general. So let's start at the top and let's take a look at what are all of the different gears we're going to make today. So here they are. So we have 9 different types. So we have these gears on top, we have these gears down here, and you'll notice there's one right here in the middle. This guy is a different type of gear, a hypoid gear, so we'll be going over that as well. Okay, so if we come back up to the top here, to begin, we have our base gear type. Now, to create the different types of gears, obviously they have different teeth, they have different numbers of teeth, they have different shapes, so we need to handle that. So that is over here with our tooth shapes, and these are all just a shape node with some different settings. So this one is a square with a size of 0.15, 0.15. So this gives us a nice little general square, and then again another square, but now I've changed the sizes here to make it a bit longer, no pun intended, a bit longer in the tooth, and that will allow us to create the different teeth around the gears, and we can use each of these to our liking, but each one is unique. So this one here is actually a polygon node with size of 6. Now that will allow us to kind of cut off through the middle here, and we get these teeth that have an angled edge to either side. But now we have 4 different teeth, and how do I use those in each gear? Well, that's when we bring them into a multi-switch grayscale, and this I gave it 4 inputs, and so I bring each of these in, and now anytime I use this to create a gear, I can just go up to this and change which input am I selecting from. So now I have the ability to have multiple teeth at a moment's notice, and here with my input I can say the input number is how many inputs there are, the input selection is which one are you using. So we start with a general shape node, and I'm using a splatter circular, and let me see if I can double click this, there we go. The splatter circular with a radius of 30, and what I'm doing here is taking 30 of those teeth around here. Now note that when you make smaller gears, they have to have either less teeth if it's smaller, I believe, and then a larger gear becomes more teeth so that they can interact with one another. So this allows us a nice modular system to do that. Now over here what I'm doing is borrowing from down here. I have a lot of nodes, sorry. So we have a shape node here, just a simple disk, and then blending into that I'm blending an add linear dodge from over here to create a little bit more of a thicker variant to it. You'll see in a second here. We're blending over top of our gear now, basically a circle with a color to kind of darken this up. And the reason is, most of what we're building right now is a height map, because we want to make sure that when we put all the gears here, we can put them on top or behind one another, but we want to make sure that that height information is correct so that it really shows through and shows us that this is definitely something that physically exists behind or in front of another object. Okay, so we'll go across here and talk about what each of these does, and then we'll talk about how we did each one. So once we have the inset here, then I want to add a little bit of a downslope here. So this is a gradient, and we want a gradient downward. So now that pushes this back and pushes this forward. You'll notice that our most forward-facing part of the height map is always going to be white. Okay, so that's the thing that is closest to the camera, and then the darker it gets, it goes backwards away from the camera. Then on the end here, you'll notice that our teeth now got a bit of a down and back and out of our face kind of bevel to it, and that's using the same kind of technique. But now this is a finished gear for the moment, because we have a flat surface here. It ramps up to a perfectly white as far as height is going to go, and then down a little bit more. And that, you can see some of that in here. Let me come in here, you'll take a look. So this gear here is a great example of that. So you can see here it's flat here, and then it kind of ramps down a little bit. And that gives us some nice contours that'll catch the light really well, and that really overall just helps the teeth have a bit more 3D-ness to them. Alright, so how do we create these crazy things that we have in here? So what we do is we take a gradient linear 1, and I pumped up the number here all the way to 16. And then using the blend trick. Now the blend trick is if you put a node into a blend node just in the foreground, then you can affect this cropping area over here. And by taking the cropping area down, I basically isolated one of the gradient linears. Now you could do this also by throwing it through a transform node. I do feel like computationally though, this is a little bit less expensive. But then I do throw it into a transform in order to move it around, because once we throw it into a Cartesian to polar, this transform affects basically the radius of this circle now. So by moving it down, I'm effectively bringing it this far out from the edge, and if I were to move this up, the circle would get smaller. So I get this to the size that I want it to be, and you notice this is what comes up over top of here. So now he gets overlaid. And this is a simple copy with a 0.42. There we go. Okay. Now I'm going to throw that into a levels because we will need this as a mask for later on. Now down here we do another variant of the same thing, and you'll notice that this one is a different size. So this is the same technique, just a different size, because this, which comes up here, is what makes our teeth sink down into the background a little bit. So same technique again, and again throwing it into a levels in order to create our mask. Okay, so that's the basic gear. Now we're going to borrow from that to create all the other gears, because essentially a gear is like a donut shape. You know, it's a circle with a hole cut out in the middle. But then we have variant types of those holes and different shapes in there, so we need to handle each of those. So here we go. So our inner gear function, a 6 spoke. So this is how we do the 6 spoke. So we're going to start off with a shape and throw it shaped node with 0.1 and 1, if you're following along. We're going to throw that into a splatter circular to create this sort of 6-sided stick-like shape. Okay. Now, blending that on top of, from here we're taking a transform from our circle, and we're making this a particular size. And this happens to be this guy here. Let's take a look at him. So this size here is going to be this outward edge, and then we're going to transform it again, make it a bit smaller, and by throwing it through a subtract, we now cut out the hole in the center. Makes sense, right? Now I'm going to blend this over here, and I'm going to actually remove from here. If I look at this, where is this coming from? I'm removing from this outer edge here, because the spokes were too long at first, so I need to subtract back so that it will fit and it will marry perfectly into this shape. Okay. So now this is basically a fancy way of creating a couple different masks, but these masks are going to be important to colorize this thing so that we can get those different gradient levels we were talking about. Okay. So we're going to invert this so that I have everything except for the shape I want. And then up here, this guy, I'm blending from up here, this circle. I'm going to cut that out, right, because we're trimming back on those arms. Then I'm going to colorize that guy to add him to our overall shape here. But we're not done, because this guy up here is going to come up and subtract from this guy. So we're going to take our gear that we had already finished before, and we're going to use him right here at the end and say, you know what, just go ahead and get rid of all the stuff in the middle here that we don't need. See, everything that's white here. Cut that out from our original gear, and that's kind of how we create this shape. But then we need this shape still to put our color back on top. So there we go. So we have our color, and that guy's all set. So that's the 6 spoke. Okay. So let's do our large center cutouts now. So that's going to be this guy up here. I think this is one of the coolest looking ones. I just like the shape of it. I like the way it turned out. He looks pretty neat. Okay. So this is actually pretty simple. We're going to take a shape node. This is a paraboloid of a 0.09. I'm going to invert the grayscale on that, because what I'm looking for is actually like this hole, but I wanted a little bit of a fall off before it becomes solid black. Then I do the levels here to adjust that. So now it's a pretty steep fall off, which is fine. That's what we need. I'm going to throw this into a blend with, let's see, yeah, he's going to be the center hole. And here, the exact same technique, but with a splatter circular. So this, I don't need an actual input like the shape here, because I can choose a pattern, and I just choose my paraboloid. So I get the setup that I want here, 6, radius of 0.24, pattern size of 0.22. And then here, I invert it and do the levels. There we go, very nice. Blend those two together, and we have all of our holes. And now, again, we just borrow from our before, from the original gear. And I'm just going to do a multiply. And that will create a nice fall off gradient right here. And it cuts out the hole that we need. There we go. So that's another type of gear done. And these are just, this is for the presentation here. So that's why that's there. All right, down to the small holes. Same principle really, we're just kind of spreading things out. So there you go. I'm going to invert the grayscale, throw it through a levels, transform. And the transform here was to rotate it because I wanted to make sure that these holes were perpendicular, and here it's in that still very hexagonal shape, and I don't like that. So we're going to blend those together with our original, cut those out. And down here, this is our mask, and so this is a levels, and then thrown through a copy of that transform. So we just copy the same transform, but apply it to 2 different outputs. We can use that as our mask. Okay, we're getting to the complicated stuff. Don't worry, a lot of these are pretty simple, but you know, it's good to kind of hammer home, here's how you create this sort of a shape. So again, a splatter circular for some more, invert, levels, transform again to make a center here. I wanted this one to be straight up and down. And then we're going to do another multiply on top of our original. And that guy, I don't know if I used one of him in this. No, I did not. Alright, so down here let's talk about the solid gear. This guy is pretty simple. I actually used this for him, and then I just didn't take anything out of the middle. I wanted a big chunk there for visual balance. But this guy's pretty simple. It's just one singular hole. And then I did go in here, let's see, in here, yeah, we added a nice little bevel around the edge here. And that's using the same trick here, a gradient linear 2 this time, because we wanted the top and bottom with a center, you'll see here, there you go, top and bottom black with a center white, and that makes this little like hump. And then by transforming that and moving that, I do the Cartesian to polar. And yes, we have the edges here that are showing up, but that's okay, because once I blend this with a copy, and I'm using this to crop out those. See, so I crop out to the center and say, this is all I want. I just want this center part here. I don't care about the edges. And now a levels here to clamp it, pardon me, clamp it in order for our mask, and we can add it on top here. This is a simple copy with a 0.18. So we're just putting that on top, so that gives us a little bit of a nudge there, so that it looks more like there's some mass and some solidity to the center there, and it's not just a hole cut out of it. Okay, and then we're going to blend on top of this our color. And what I do for these is this color is, I believe, just a black, or maybe it's a gray. It might be a gray. Actually, I should turn that to a grayscale. But put that over top of this guy at a 0.63, and that's how I determine how close or far from the camera I want this to be, really. Because once you create this, you can change this value and say, if you do less of an overlay, then it becomes more light in color, and that means it's going to move closer to the camera. So that's how we determine the distance. Okay, so now this guy, which I did not name, but this guy is a neat one. I used him a couple times because it's just a cool shape. So there are these spokes that come off of a center wheel here, and these spokes are tapered. So the taper was interesting. So what we did here was, you'll notice that I also wanted to create a gear that did not already exist in my upper part there. So what I had to do was take a shape again, and I'm going to borrow from that multi-switch. You'll notice that this multi-switch is actually calling from way up here. So it's taking each of those tooth shapes. Okay? So then I create my gear, and this guy has 42 teeth. And what I would try to make sure that each tooth is the approximate width of the gap between the teeth as well. So that means that another gear of the same type next to it would actually function. Okay? Alright, so then we're going to blend and cut out the typical shape we have from above to cut out our center hole here. But now we need to create a center ring that all of these can connect to. And that's done through a subtract using our previous shapes. So we just come up here and I said, okay, let me get this shape and cut this shape out of it. I did the inverse earlier, So now we're going to take that shape out of that. And that gives us this nice center ring. And then I combine those two together. There we go, looking good. And now we need the actual spokes. So the spokes are a polygon 1, sides of 3, with a rotation of 0.25. This gives us a triangle that is straight up and down. And then I'm going to do a transform. And here you'll notice that I stretched it way off the page, way out of proportion here. And what that does for me is then if I do another transform, and this is set to no tiling, so then if I set this guy the same thing and I scale him in, you'll notice now it's cut off that top and bottom. And by cutting off that top and bottom, I've created a shape that doesn't come with the software. Pretty simple. And then I can take that with a splatter circular with the right setting. So this is a 4, a 0.3, and a pattern size of 0.3 with a rotation of 0.75. And you'll notice they line up nicely. And we have this odd shape now in there, and we have a really cool looking gear with a pretty complex shape. I mean, not too complex, but it doesn't come with the software, so we had to generate it somehow. Okay. This is a neat one too. I like this guy a lot. So again, I wanted to make some different type of teeth. So for here, when I did the splatter circular, I actually decreased the radius. So that means that the teeth are actually a bit shorter. But then again, still, whatever their width is needs to be the same width for the gap as well as for the actual tooth. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Then we're going to subtract our hole from the center. And then here, I could have borrowed from above, really. I think they're pretty much the same. But we're going to do our splatter circular of a paraboloid, and we're going to invert the grayscale, and then clamp the values, and then subtract those, or multiply rather, on top. So now we have this sort of pinion gear, and this is very similar to what you'll see in lots of drivetrains for cars. Okay, then we're going to blend a color on top of this with a multiply, and we want to make sure that we make this a little bit lighter. We want to make sure that our frame around everything is pure white, and nothing else is pure white because it will interpede, and we want to make sure that everything else goes below that. Okay, so then here I'm bringing back the overlay of the edges of the teeth to bring that down a bit. And then here, I wanted to try something. So this was a bit of an experiment. I'll show you the result and then we'll talk about how I came to this. So here's the result of it, is I have this sort of inward plate that is perfectly surrounding the circles, and it's sort of a donut shaped plate over top of this, but it has the cutouts from around the circle. So how do we do that? So I'm going to take this shape and I'm going to do a color to mask. And I'm going to only select that innermost lightest value. And what that does is that sort of makes the selection we need here. Then I'm going to bevel that. And by beveling it, I get a bevel here, here, and on the insides of these circles. Okay, that's really good. So that's brought everything sort of like a stroke value inward. Then I'm going to do a color to mask again and choose again the lightest value. And what that gives me is our end result here, which is the whole original area. You'll notice a difference. That's way too thick. Then here we're a lot more like that negative stroke, and it's deleting as it moves. And then I put the two on top of each other and we get a really interesting looking gear, which I'm sad to say I did not use in this shape. He would be very interesting in here. So there we go. Okay, so now the crazy stuff. We're going to work on our Hypoid. So there are two types of Hypoid gears that I saw to create here, and I have a bit of a reference here. So here's our reference. So this Hypoid gear is this shape, and then there's another type of one that goes this way, and the idea is that you're translating this type of motion to this type of motion. So you can change a gear chain from one direction to another. Okay? So the first thing we're going to build is, let's see, first one is this guy. I call this the perpendicular one. This guy. So this is parallel to the surface, perpendicular to the surface. So the perpendicular one was pretty interesting. So we begin with, I always pronounce this wrong, an alveolus. Wow, that's difficult. But we throw this guy through a levels, and you'll notice that I'm trying to really pump the values so that I get basically this line here. It's not quite a squiggly line like we need, but it's pretty close. So if I blur it quite a bit, then I'll get even closer, right? Now if I take a shape node, and this is a 1 and a 0.25 on the Y, and I put this into the input and use this as my driving force for the warp, you'll notice what we're starting to get here. We're starting to get a nice little wiggly line. I think that's what I even called it. Wiggle, yeah. wiggle build. So this is the area where we're building the initial wiggle. Okay, now we're going to blur grayscale high quality, and I just pump all the values up, 16 and 1. And then I do a color to mask, and I'm going to select from the innermost part. And this gave me a really cool design in here. I like these little pockets that it formed. I don't end up using them, but if you want to use those for something else, go for it. Now, from here, we're going to go and we're going to create a transform 2D, okay? And I'm just scaling it down so that it automatically tiles. Then I'm going to do another transform 2D, this guy, and it's the exact same thing, but then I moved it. So I moved it down by exactly negative 0.5. And when I blend those two together, look what I get. So I get a lot more lines, a lot more packed. You won't be able to get this from just transforming and scaling and crunching it, because your wiggles will actually flatten out. So this is a good way to get these lines in between these lines. Okay. Then I'm going to transform and rotate it a bit to get the angle I'm looking for. And let's see, gradient overlays on top of, let's talk about this first. We'll come back to that in just a second. So how am I going to get this rounded gradient on it? So I'm going to use a gradient linear 2. Then I'm going to put that through a skew grayscale. And I'm skewing it at this angle, amount of 0.5. Then I'm going to transform and move it up a bit. And I'm going to do a blend, and I'm going to cut off the bottom half. So what I'm looking for is from this line to here, and if you were to ignore this top corner, okay? So now, by transforming and flipping and then blending a copy of itself back, we get basically the whole shape. So I have a gradient that goes from black to white to black, but it's across this semi-triangular shape. Now I'm going to blur it in order to get rid of that center seam line. There was a pretty nasty seam there. Okay? So that is what I'm going to put on top of this. And this guy is coming from a mask down here. Okay, so this mask is a polygon 1 with 6 sides, and I'm going to do the blend trick again where I put it into the foreground, and I'm going to remove the whole right hand half of this. So that cuts off right down the middle. But you'll notice that this shape, let's take just a second, you'll notice that shape is this shape that we need. Okay? So that's our mask for the overall shape. See? Overall shape. And then I'm going to transform and move it a little bit just so that it's not all the way at this edge. And the invert mask is so that we can do some masking. But if we bring this up here, now let's overlay that gradient we made. Look at how nice that looks. This looks like an object where the topmost part is right here in my face, and then it gradients off and gradients off. Okay, that's most of the effort there. So now, then we have our wiggle. We're going to put this in here, and we're going to also apply the gradient to it. So you can kind of see that here. That gradient is going across because this is part of the surface, so it has to also match that gradient. Otherwise, it will look strange and it won't really be, you know, fitting in well. It'll stand out in a bad way. All right, so here we're going to subtract our wiggle mask. So this is the same wiggles up here, down here, just blown out with the levels here to become our mask. So we're going to subtract that from our overall shape. All right, well that's good. That tells us that there should not be that type of a gradient there, but it still looks wrong, right? So this is where we're going to blend in the wiggles that have the gradient. And that's what we get this shape here from. And now here, this is our wiggle grooves mask build. So what I needed to do was that gradient needs to go on top of here, but only in the grooves. Because if you look here, our mask goes all the way to the edges. So that's going to look wrong if we have all this crap in the background and we don't really want that. And I can't just cut it out. I need to make sure that it's within this area, but only within the grooves. So the way we do that here is I'm going to take this guy, and this is a subtract, and I'm subtracting from this shape. So I'm saying give me, now black is wrong, I want what's inside these grooves. Then here I can blend that on top with the inverted grayscale, and now white is wrong but black is what I want. Okay, so then we just invert it, and now I have just the grooves, and I can take those grooves and use that as a mask, and there we go. So that is the one type of hypoid gear, the perpendicular one. So now let's talk about the parallel one, which is this guy here. Alright, so down here, is everybody doing well in the chat? I'm sorry, I'm just in tutorial mode. Let me know if you have any questions at all, if I'm going too fast, or if there's anything you guys are curious about, let me know. I'm happy to help. So we're working on the hypoid parallel now. So to do this, we're going to take a transform, and we're transforming from, see, we're borrowing all over the place, from this guy, because what I need is I need these teeth that can get a little bit curved, but they're going to need to have this overall shape, but only if they were taller and skinnier. Huh, that's interesting. They can be. So if I transform this and scale the hell out of it, so I made it really small to make them very, very thin. Okay? Then I'm going to do my trick here, and I'm going to isolate just a singular one of them. Perfect. Now again here I'm doing the same thing with a solid white version. This is acting sort of like a mask at the moment. And now I can throw this into a splatter circular. And my settings here are, in case you're following along and you'd like to know, 32.25, and down here image input of course, and then my pattern size is 0.25, and I have a rotation of 0.08, and I am using the center orientation with the pattern pivot obviously as center, and that gives us this sort of a nice look. Now I'm going to do a bevel here, or a blend rather, excuse me. I was having trouble with the blur grayscale. It would not take directly from the splatter circular, so this is just a transitional node. So we're going to go over here, we're going to blur grayscale, high quality, quality of 1, but only an intensity of 0.93. And the goal here is to go from this, we have these harsh edges here and here, so we want to get rid of those and kind of round those off and make these nice teeth. Okay, then we're going to blur the whole thing just to kind of give it a little bit more of a flattened nature. So this is a 1.53 for that blur. Now down here I'm doing the same pattern here, but I'm using the mask feature. So here it's pure white. Go to this, splatter circular, and I'm actually doing twice as many here. And you'll see why in just a moment, but I do twice as many teeth, if you will, here. There's 64 here, whereas remember we only had 32 up here. Okay, again, the blur was having an issue, so this is a transitional node. Blur, so we put all those together and start to create a nice little foundational base that we can put something on top of. And then affect the levels just a little bit, play with the levels if I wish. Now over here, I'm going to blend these two guys together with a screen. And so what that's going to give me is this shape, but on top of this base. And you'll see there, it kind of pops out the center a little bit better. Now, I'm going to start blending and making these things lighter or darker. So using the uniform color with black, I'm sharing that between these two nodes. And then doing the same thing for the base. Then we're going to do a histogram scan from this guy. And now watch carefully, because we're going to take this, and this position and contrast I played with quite a bit to get just the right value. So that when we blend the two together and I put one on top of the other, you'll see here this creates a really nice gradient effect. So we have these teeth that some are a little higher than the ones next to them, but they share kind of a common base. So that's what all of this is giving us, is that nice value, because from here to here I needed to pump up just the center, almost like taking a slice from this thing horizontally. Just the center, pump it up a bit so that when I put the two together, this guy stands above the rest. Okay? But he still needs to sort of be close to its neighbor down at the bottom. And this all gets a little blurred, and you know, it looks fantastic. So now we need this inner ring. So this inner ring is very simple. It's two circles cut out from one another. There we go. And this guy is 0.44, and this guy is a 0.39, in case you're following along. Subtract, and then here I'm going to blur, I'm going to blend color on top of him to change his height. And then I'm just going to put him directly on top of our existing teeth. Looking pretty good. And then here is a levels from the gradient ring. Yes, okay. So we're going to gradient this ring downwards, and this gradient ring is coming from down here. We're doing the same trick as before. Might even be able to copy from above, but we do need different positions for everything. So by gradient ring, and then we can have this transition. So up here, when we put him in place, he's a subtract of a 0.5. So now we have our outward gear teeth and our inward, and it slopes down nicely. And then here is him positioned on the chart before. I think I was going to put him in the corner, but it didn't work out. So there we go. So here he is on the chart, and it looks really nice. But now when you position these, be sure that you put the one like this. So the way that this works is this gear turning, those teeth feed into these wiggled grooves that we created, and that will spin this guy a different direction. Okay? That was the only one that I really needed a good reference for, because it was a little difficult to figure out the shape. The rest of these are pretty flat, and they do have, you know, they're gears. They have a pretty simple setup. Now, you can set up a node that you could drag and drop into your project that would have all of these already built into it, and you could expose the parameters on this guy to say, I can drop down a new gear and then say what kind of teeth it has, and you can expose the splatter circular and say this is the kind of the number of teeth, and even the radius is important, because that radius will determine how outward facing these go. If you increase this number, they'll push out or push in. My graphics card is a bit older and it's doing a lot right now, so I'm not going to change the values real time, but you will see it that it'll push out or in, so that will determine the teeth. And the other thing to keep in mind is, if you're going to do teeth that are longer, say more like these guys, okay, something more like this, you want to make sure that your initial gear here is a bit smaller to allow room for the teeth on this square texture area, because otherwise it's going to get cut off and then it's not going to look right. Okay, so now let's go over here and let's talk about, for just a couple minutes here, let's talk about how we did all of this crazy mess. Okay, so I just wanted to make something that looked kind of like the innards of a clock or something like that, and it looks really cool, and I'm very happy with how it turned out. And I only used one real material from the base setup here. Just I wanted something that looked a little copperish, a little, you know, brassy, little inside metal. So that's what we did. So to start off with is we have to position everything. Okay, so I'll show you the end result here and we'll work backwards. So this is everything in the height map positioned. All right, so here's all the different gears. So let's work backwards and figure that out, and then all of this is building all of the masks, and then all of this is adding all of the other materials together. So this is all the base color, the normal, the roughness, the metallic, all that kind of stuff. And then everything gets just kind of combined into here. Okay, so to begin with, I called this thing the top cap. It got kind of overwritten there by the word frame, but the top cap is this little piece here, this guy right here. So all this guy is a simple shape node, and then a levels, and then blending this guy with a color. And I used black most of the time, and then I just changed the amount, and that helps me to determine where it ends up on the height map. And then the transform to position him in the chart, and then transform off of the levels becomes his mask. Okay? So A1 and 2 is this gear and this gear. Alright? So again, you can see here I'm taking from the teeth, I'm making my own gear. Very nice. Putting the overlay over top of the teeth to bring those down, and then positioning him on the chart. Then we're going to blend over top with the black color again, 0.75. And here I'm borrowing all the way from our finished gear from all the way over here. Okay, when we did our solid gear earlier, you'll notice he's done. So let's go back over here, and we're just going to position him on the chart, and I'm going to put the first one on top of him. Now you can really start to see the different gradients here that we're working with to create a proper height map. And I'm going to put the cap on top of him. So that's A1 and 2 complete. Okay, so then we're going to go over to B, and B is this guy right here, right on the end. And you'll notice that his teeth, although they're not the same size technically, they would in theory be able to turn this gear the way that they would hit. And I obviously did that on purpose, tried to make it as realistic as possible. So this guy is, we're borrowing from the same piece that we just made, the cap here, and then blending color again. And he's the same color height, so he should have the same height information as these two, because these two gears obviously have to be at the same height in order to interact with one another, correct? So we transform him, move him into position, and we move his mask as well. Then our B gear is just the same copy from one over here that we just made, just smaller. And then we position him and we do the color overlay as well. And then here we're going to combine everything on top of one another. So these two are combined, so they should interact with one another. Although this is technically a little bit higher up, closer to the camera, but we'll just say he's thicker and he'll be able to still turn that gear. and we'll put that in place. Now you'll notice that in the final product here, our frame here is cutting right down the middle of this, but we're going to put the frame on last. My original setup, I was adding or subtracting the frame every time, and it's a waste. So we'll do the frame when we're all done. Okay, so gear C is this big guy down here, and I should have put something in his center, is technically around here, but the main purpose of this gear was to create a gear to show off that had a ton of teeth. And now anybody who's been paying attention for the last 30 minutes can tell me that the teeth are wrong here. These should be a little bit wider, each tooth, or we need to make sure that there's less of them so that they have the same width. So little mistakes are made, but that's okay, we learn. So again, we're borrowing from before to select an input, and we're generating our own gear from there, and then we're going to transform 2D and position it, and then this is a 0.5. So there he is, nice and overlaid and in the corner. Excellent. And then he gets added to the stack. There we go. Okay. Now D, this is one of these gears, and again, same trick, but now we get to the point where we have to start removing things because we have gears interacting with one another, or we have gears that are on top or below one another. So we need to make sure that we take that into account. So for example, this gear needs to both be hidden by its predecessor, well, by both of its predecessors actually. So here you'll notice that this comes all the way down here and comes back, but we come all the way down here to our masks, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I'm taking the other gear and cutting out from the top, taking this gear and cutting out from here, so that all you really see of this gear is this guy here. Okay, so let's come back. We were here. There we go. So I start with this one because I have easy access to him, and then I go all the way down there and come back to get that. And by taking this color here, so we have the right colorization, we have the right gradient effect to this, and then by using our proper mask, which is built from down below, you'll see that he properly gets added to the chart, and he gets added underneath of this and underneath of this. Okay, now I like this gear, like I said, so I wanted to use it. So we put him up in the corner here, and he doesn't technically connect to anything, but he looks nice. So again, we're going to do a gradient, and this is a 0.41. I wanted to have different layers to this, so not everything was at a 0.75, 0.25, so let's do a 0.41, make it a little different. And there we go. We're just going to add him directly on top of everything with the proper mask. And we'll go over the masks in just a second. And finally, we have this gear here. And this guy is, again, we spend a lot of time making those spokes, so we want to make sure we use them because they were cool. And we're going to blend over top, and again, this is a 0.41 as well, so he's at the same level as this guy, technically. And when I added that to the chart, I wanted to make sure that maybe it'd be possible for him to kind of just tick that along. So I just wanted to make it look possible. Who knows if it actually is or isn't. There we go. Okay, so that's almost all of them. But now I wanted to try something crazy. So in trying something crazy, I said, how do we fill in the background with gears in a semi-logical way, logical enough that it looks realistic without it having to be hand placed to make sure everything is properly working. So the way we do that is I'm going to take a gear that I like, so this one with the spokes that we made with the cool tapered spokes, I'm going to throw it into a splatter node. And the splatter, my pattern settings here are 100, 100, rotation of a negative 46.29, not sure how that happened. Rotation variation of 106. My zoom is at 7,053, but that starts to move these guys around, and then in order to get them even more varied, I pan them around a bunch. Disorder is at 91, disorder angle 140, but the important part down here is size variation of 80.71, and then our output minimum level I put at 0.17. So that made sure that none of them would be completely black, which means they would be totally in the background and we would never see them at all. And then what I did was for the luminance variation, I changed this to a 0.57. So this means that we have some gears that are a lot lighter than others and some that are behind one another, and that kind of automatically gives us what we were looking for, to have gears in the distance, gears in the foreground, some in the middle ground. But then we need to make sure that all of these, even the ones that appear to be almost pure white, all of these need to be behind everything else we've already created. So in order to do that, we take the splatter and I'm going to again blend over top of it, an opacity of 0.85, and you'll notice that makes everything nice and dark. It might even be a little hard to see, but there is a gear here and here, and that means that we can take these and put them in the background of everything else. But we needed one hell of a mask to make that happen, right? So my mask here, you'll see this is my invert grayscale mask, means these are all the previous gear shapes. So you're free to put anything in the white areas of this. So our end result looks like this, and it is again difficult to see. I'll try and zoom in a little bit. There you go, you can start to see some of them in there. So our gears are all in the background, and this creates for a really nice height map. And now our final touch, we put our frame on top, and we're all set to go over to the final inputs. But creating this mask was pretty difficult, so let's take a look at how we created all the masks to make all of this work. So you'll see each of these pulls from a mask from this point. That's why we have all the crisscrossing lines. And the masks are going to be especially important when we get down here to the colors. Okay. So to begin with, our frame mask is pretty simple. It's two shapes cut out from one another. These are a shape node of a square, 0.9, and then a solid 1.0. Do a subtract, there you go, you have a very simple frame. Very easy for paintings, whatever else you got to do. Most of these are going to be the item in question with the levels, and it's been fully crunched all the way to the left. If you grab the right hand ticker and go all the way to the right, all the way to the left rather, you get just a solid white dot. So then these blends here, what I'm doing is as we go along, I'm blending each one with its previous, and we start to generate a mask that is all of the gears we have put down. So for example, we begin with this gear, or with this top piece, and I'm going to blend into it this gear. So that would be this guy here. Okay, so it looks solid white because I put a white mask on top of a white mask, obviously. Then when I blend in this overall gear, you'll see now it just sort of grows, which is perfect because that's what we want. The whole idea of this is that this is where all the other gears are at the moment. So then I'm just going to keep combining these, and there you go, you can make sure that the teeth will work, and then combining each one, there you go. Now here it doesn't matter, we don't have to do any fancy cutouts, we can just say, let's go ahead and just combine all of these things, combine some more, there we go, put them all together, and now we have all of them, but now we need a couple of different variants to make this work. So here's a mask of all the background gears. Then here's all the gears in total, so that we can get the background to make all of this just black, because we don't care about it. We just want to make it, you know, it's a background color essentially. So this is all the gears together, and then here's just the background, which is all the gears inverted. So this is my mask that I use to paint whatever I want in the background, and these are just the background gears. So then when we come over here, we can finally say, all right, well, my mask now is an invert of all of the gears that have been hand placed, and that's where we're going to put the background gears. Okay, so all that's well and good, and now we have all of our masks. So let's go over how we colorize everything, and it is the same metal texture every time, but I've done something I think was a little clever with figuring out how to add some variety. So if we look at this, this is our metal 003, which comes with substance. Thank you again for a great piece of software, a great little metal that we can use. Now each of these is going to be a blend over top of, I'm cutting out from my mask. So this is my color, my normals in the same spot, my roughness, and my metallic. I'm not taking the height information because we built our custom height. Then this is each time I'm blending with the next one. So this is A blended with B. Now B, beginning here, because I used just the normal texture right away, I wanted to make a little bit of a change. So each time here, before I actually use it and cut it out, I'm just rotating, scaling, or moving this base input. And then by copying and pasting each pair of nodes, and then realigning each of these, just reconnecting everything, I'm taking from the same base input, but I'm adding some variety by moving it around, scaling it, rotating it. We make sure that we're not just using the exact same spot every time. So then here you'll notice that this guy, for example, when I blend these two together, you'll notice that that inner circle is clearly different because it's now this guy but rotated and moved, and now you can see that we're getting that variety without too much extra work. Okay? So that's really the secret to how all of this works, and then these are all just combining and doing the same pattern over and over again. But you'll see here's another example. You can clearly see the cutout of the one gear on top of the other. Even though this is just the diffuse color, we can definitely see the different shapes in there because of that. Just that simple rotation and move means there's a lot more variety, which means now if we do put this into like Unreal or something, we start rotating these things, they're not going to look weird if this one rotates at the same rate as this one and the texture is the same. That would just look sloppy. So we're going to blend all these across, and you'll notice, I'll show you towards the end here as everything starts to get pretty crazy put together. There we go. So you see even there we can see a difference in the pattern to make sure that we're not making it just look like it's one piece cut out from the same section of the same sheet. It just looks bad. So now here what we need to do is start putting in the background as well. So this is inserting the background, and this background has to go in between these gears and these gears in the background that we added. So we need to make sure we use our proper masks, which come off of there. And then for our roughness, I wanted to make sure that the background wasn't shiny, so the background of that only needs to be white for the roughness, meaning that it is purely rough, and then there's not going to be any differences there. And then here, this is all using our frame. We're putting our frame on top of that, so here's what our final maps actually end up looking like. So there's our normal, if I do that, yeah. And our roughness, so these are not quite totally rough, but they have a little bit of a sheen to them. The background is entirely rough. Metalness, obviously, only the things that are metal, and the background is black for once. And then we come all the way up here, you'll see that our height build is exactly what we've been building this whole time. It comes right from there, and our normal comes right from there as well. We did generate a normal map by doing all of these, but I don't actually end up using it because I didn't really like the way it looks. There's something about it. It has this strange kind of dents in it. It almost looks like this whole gear would have a huge dent, as if you just grabbed it and bent it with your hands. So that ends up looking a little too strange. So instead of that, we end up just taking just the general shapes that we have, and that's fine for our example here. It looks great. We would go in and make some micro scratches, micro dents, maybe do some edge wear, and make sure that those scratches and dents are occurring where they naturally and mechanically would, around the edges and around the teeth as these things interact with one another a whole bunch. So there we go, and then our base maps are all set up, and this is actually what gets exported. So very nice. So that's the tutorial. We have all of that going, and everything works here. And if you are interested, I can put this on my site. You guys can download it, take a look at it. Of course, this should become a video, so you'll be able to take a look at that and follow along as well. And I hope I didn't go too fast for you. If I did, I apologize. You know, live streams, I was a little nervous. You want to be moving along, and you can always pause it and take a look at it there if you like. Do we have any questions, any comments, anything like that before we do the giveaway? Just give it a moment to see if anybody has anything they would like to know or see while we have it here live. If you have any questions, please let me know. Okay. Well, if nothing heard, then as I mentioned in the beginning, this is the 5-year celebration of my web series, I guess you could call it, the Polygon Pilgrimage. And again, if you're not familiar or if you're new to the stream, you just joined us, we are celebrating 5 years of creating a tutorial every week. And whatever I'm learning as I'm continuing pushing to be a better artist every day, I want to make sure that I thank everybody who has been a part of that journey, and it's been really fantastic. So if you guys are not already subbed, this is my page here, the Pilgrimage. Just recently did a Carpathian burl texture. That was really fun. So come on over and subscribe. What I do is I do tutorials every week, and if you see something, or you don't see something rather, that you need, So you're trying to learn how to do something in Unreal, in Unity, in Maya. I do Substance, obviously. Just let me know, and I'll figure it out, and then we both know, and that's really the whole point. So to celebrate that, I asked Algorithmic if I could buy a key to give away to you guys, and they were very gracious and very kind, and they actually told me, you know what, we'll handle it. You pick a winner and then have them contact us, and basically they get a free 1-year subscription. Now they did say to Substance, so I don't know what that means. I just got Substance and it's an enigma. It can be at first. I have learned to really love the procedural flow. I try to do as much as I can fully procedurally. You'll notice that this entire thing we made here, not one single source bitmap image was used. So it's all done inside of the software. It's incredible. So add me to your list, or if you have a question anytime with this, please let me know and I'll be happy to help. That's what we do. So yeah, I contacted them and said, I love your software and I want to thank you for 5 years of growing as an artist, and a lot of my videos have really hit home and have been successful because of your software. So I'd like to give out a key if I could. And they said, you know what, we'll take care of it. You just let us know who wins. So I have a little tool over here. I've now exported a list of every single subscriber as of this moment. We're at 1,179, which, let me tell you, that has been a journey in itself. Last year, my birthday is next month, and last year on my birthday I hit 200 subs. And I was so excited, and I said, this is great. People are enjoying it. They love it. So then I said, okay, this year I'm going to go for 300 subs, 100 subs a year. That's what I thought I was capable of. And here we are at over 800 in a year. So I'm excited. I'm bursting at the seams. So thank you so much. So without further ado, let's go ahead and pick our winner. So I'm going to do the export one last time. Let's do a refresh. There we go. Okay. Drum roll. Let's see. Click the button. Where is it at? There it is. Okay. And our winner is, how do I say that? Oh, our winner is Axel Tech. Oh, Alexel Tech, pardon me. Alexel Tech. You are the lucky winner, so thank you so much. Really appreciate you being a viewer and being a subscriber and being with us on this journey. So Alexel Tech, I will be sending you a message, and all you have to do is create an account with Algorithmic, and then tell me what your account name is. I don't need any of your personal information, just whatever the name is, and I will send that to them and say, this is the person I've selected as the winner. Then they're going to turn on something in the background to give you a free 1-year subscription. Okay? So congratulations very much. I'm going to copy that down right now so that we make sure we get that. There we go. Congratulations, and thank you again, everybody who joined us for today. I had a ton of fun, and I really want to get back into streaming more often if I can. So I'm going to work with the guys at 80 level just to let them be aware of when I do this. And thank you to them again, as they just posted in the chat. Yes, we're celebrating 5-year anniversary. It's awesome, and it's never going to stop. As long as there's breath in my body, the pilgrimage will continue, and we will continue to grow. And just, if you have any question at all, let me know. And just please, let me help you, because then we both learn. And that is what it's all about. I just want to make awesome art. I want you to make awesome art. So let's do it. So, okay, we're going to shut down for now. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. Contact me on Twitch, on YouTube. Become a subscriber. Send me a message. It's all totally free, always. Let's make some awesome stuff. So thanks again to 80 level for their gracious hosting. It's been a lot of fun. And we'll turn this into a video. I will post the Substance file to my website, and it'll be free to download. I will let you know when it's available. And until then, guys, as I usually say in my videos, keep practicing, get better, and I'll see you next time.